Shalom, this is Yair Davidiy speaking to you from the land of Israel. Today we are about to discuss a biblical subject that is some interest and is also a pertinence to a common phenomenon in our time. A lot of people suffer from depression, they suffer from mental disturbances, or perturbations, worries, depression, schizophrenia. A lot of sicknesses, mental sicknesses, happen to the population in these days. And not only that, but everyone, or a good portion of the people, to some degree, also are afflicted by these kinds of mood changes. That doesn't mean that they're mentally sick, though it can lead to mental sickness. But it means that their regular lives are interfered with. They do things that they otherwise would not do, and they have trouble overcoming these black spots in their lives. And this is quite common. It is well known. It's not necessarily negative. A lot of people know how to use it, to utilize the energies that they got, to fight against it, to use it for positive purposes. Maimonides, a great Jewish sage in the Middle Ages, he quotes from Aristotle that no great man exists who was not attacked with this melancholy. And so this is something that we can live with, that we can face up to, that we can cope with. And the Bible also speaks of it. So one of the people in the Bible who were attacked by it was Saul, and Saul did not succeed in overcoming it. David also to a degree suffered from it, and David overcame it. It sheds light on an aspect of a biblical story that is of importance. So this is what we'll discuss. King Saul was the first king of Israel. Technically, Maimonides considers Moses and Joshua as also kings of Israel. They preceded Saul. But nevertheless, it is usually accepted to consider Saul as the first king. Before King Saul, Israel was ruled over by Moses, then by Joshua, then by the judges and the elders, and then by Saul. And after Saul came David. The name Saul in Hebrew is pronounced as Shaul. It means or suggests something which is loaned on loan, because the name Shaul testifies to the inherent limitations of the kingdom of Saul, because Saul was, as if to say, on loan. He was there temporarily until the rightful king, who was David, should come and take what belonged to him. Before Saul, Israel was ruled by the prophet Samuel. We are told that Samuel was accepted as a leader. He was a successful leader. He helped save Israel, he helped guide them, but his children did not go in his footsteps, and the people were dissatisfied, so they demanded a king. We also learn from the Bible, as we find in 1 Samuel 12:12, that there were incursions from neighbouring countries of their enemies, of the Ammonites under King Nahash, and so too the people wanted a king to lead them in battle like the other nations around them had. So they demanded a king, and God told Samuel to listen to the voice of the people. And then he told them that tomorrow the future king, the person you shall anoint as king, shall come to you. Prepare a feast for him. So it happened that Saul was a young man at the time. He apparently served his uncle. His uncle lost a flock of donkeys. So Saul and his servant went to search for these donkeys. And they were looking around, looking all over for them, and couldn't find them. And they happened to pass by the place where Samuel was staying. So it was suggested that perhaps they should turn in and ask Samuel if he knew where the donkeys were, because Samuel was a well-known prophet. He had the second sight, as if to say he could see things. And it was accepted to go to the prophet to help solve problems such as these. You must remember, this was before the time of traffic, before the time of of cars and trucks and so on, and donkeys were quite valuable, and beasts of burden, and you needed donkeys for everything. So for a whole flock of donkeys to go astray was a serious event. So they went there, they went to the township, and they met Samuel, and asked Samuel about the donkeys, and he said not to worry, the donkeys have been found. But come to the feast which I prepared for you. So they went to the feast, and then they ate there. Saul received the chief portion, and after that Samuel took Saul aside and anointed him. Samuel took Saul aside and anointed him, and they went their ways. After that, there was a convocation of all the tribes of Israel, all the peoples of Israel came together, and they had a kind of lottery in which they cast lots. And first it came out on the tribe of Benjamin, and then it came out on the household of the clan of Saul, and then it came out on Saul, and Saul was therefore in front of everyone declared to be the king of Israel. But Saul himself didn't relate to this. He was quite modest. He went and hid. He didn't really want the post. And the people were not impressed by him, or a section of the people were not impressed by him, and Saul went to his house. He went home. He went back to his place of dwelling as if nothing had happened. After that, Nahash, the king of the Ammonites, besieged Yabesh Gilead, which was an Israelite settlement east of the Jordan, a township, and he besieged it, and the people wanted to make terms with the besiegers. So Nahash said, on condition that you submit yourselves to me, become my servant, everyone amongst you have his right eye plucked out. So they asked Nahash to give them 3 days to try and find an alternative, and Nahash agreed. Meanwhile, the Israelites sent of Nahash under Yabesh Gilead, the people of Yabesh Gilead sent messengers to all of Israel. Saul heard what had happened. He was exceedingly angry. Saul was angry. It says in 1 Samuel 11:6, and the Spirit of God came upon Saul mightily when he heard these words, and he became very angry. And then Saul led the Israelites against Ammon, and the people of Yabesh Gilead were saved. And after this, Samuel the prophet called the people to Gilgal, and there they renewed the kingdom. And Saul was once again accepted as king, this time with more general affirmation. Saul led the people and defeated the enemies of Israel round about. He defeated all the Philistines. He defeated a lot of different enemies from different nations who came against Israel. He was assisted by his son Jonathan. The prophet Samuel the prophet Samuel then commanded Saul to go and wipe out the Amalekites, the people of Amalek, and them and everything with them, including all of their livestock, to wipe them out thoroughly. Saul went and he did as commanded. He wiped out nearly everything there, apart from the king whom he kept alive, and also the choice portions of the livestock. He also did not destroy. Samuel came and he was angry with Saul, and he told Saul that because of what he had done, because he had not fulfilled the commandment of God Almighty, the kingdom would be taken away from him. He was told that the kingdom would be given to another, someone better than himself. After that, God sent Samuel to Bethlehem in Judah. In Bethlehem, Judah, he came to the house of Jesse, Yeshai in Hebrew. Yeshai had 8 sons. David was the youngest of them, and Samuel was told to anoint him, and he did, and he anointed David. And then the Spirit of God came upon David. We're told the Spirit of God came upon David at the exact time that he departed from Saul. If you look at the the verses concerning this event, they are one adjacent to the other. 1 Samuel 16 says, Then Samuel took the horn of wood and anointed him, that is David, in the midst of his brothers. The Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon David from that day forward, and Samuel arose and went to Ramah. Now the Spirit of the Lord, in Hebrew, the Hebrew connotes that this happened then, now. The Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul. That is, when David received the Spirit, it had departed from Saul at that very moment. And an evil spirit from the Lord terrorized him. And so Saul suffered. He suffered afterwards. He suffered from an evil spirit that came upon him and terrorized him, perturbed him. The servants of Saul recommended that David, who was also known as a warrior and as a talented musician, should play the harp, that David should play the harp before him, and that the music should soothe his spirit. And so David was appointed to Saul, and he did play the harp before him, and this did help. David later saved Israel from Goliath, the giant, and from the Philistines. He became a warrior. He continued to succeed as under the service of Saul. Saul became jealous and angry and quite crazy, and he tried to kill David several times, and David fled. He went wandering around the wilderness while Saul pursued after him. Eventually Saul and his sons were killed at Mount Gilboa fighting against the Philistines, and David became king in Hebron in Judah for 2 years, and after that he became king over all of Israel. So after this brief outline of what happened, we should consider what the great commentators said concerning the madness that came upon Saul. The Abarbanel in the 1400s, late 1400s, he attributes it to the effects of depression. He has a somewhat rational approach. He gives a rationalistic explanation. He says that Saul was simply disappointed. He was that way inclined. Melancholy came over him. When he was informed that his kingship was lost, he dwelt on this, and he just broke down. He had a breakdown, as if to say, and he became depressed. Rabbi David Valley, in the 1600s, 1700s, he says that the evil spirit from the Lord was a real evil spirit. Was such a thing in his philosophy, in the philosophy of Rabbi David Valley. He said that there was an evil spirit came upon Saul, and this evil spirit had first requested permission from God to afflict Saul, and this permission was given unto him. The Zohar, possibly in the form we have it from the 1200s, but based on much more ancient texts, the Zohar, in the understanding of Sheftai Weiss, in his commentary Mishpot Zahav in 2003, he paraphrases the Zohar in other works. He says that Saul had initially received the Spirit of God Almighty. When this left, as if Saul was overcome with emptiness, there was an emptiness inside him. First he had been elated, he had been on another plane, he had been elevated beyond the ranks of ordinary men. He had been close to God, and then when this left him, this inspiration, this inner spirit, this inner dwelling of godly feeling left him, he became crazy due to the emptiness. It was as if he had become unclean whereas initially he had been purified at a high level. The very negation of this feeling, of this gift, caused a type of impurity to overcome him. And he says that the music of David caused a degree of happiness to enter into Saul, and once this happiness comes in, it drives away the sadness, and this is how Saul was able to be helped to some degree. He also points out from different texts that David had the power to make people happy. He also had the power to overcome disappointments and depressions, and this was one of the sources of his rulership. That people went to David or used the Psalms and the music and the attitude of David to overcome their problems. The Dark 1160 1235, Rabbi David Kimhe, he points out that the word we translated as terrorized, and when it says, now the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, an evil spirit from the Lord terrorized him. Hebrew is batato, and this connotes kicking, beating. Actually, the English word beat is derived from ba'at, from the same word root, and the Hebrew connotes a continuing, ongoing process, as if Saul was hit, as if afflicted over and over again by this troubling of the spirit that it drove him crazy. Yehuda Kyle, in the commentary Da'at Mikra, 1981, he compares different biblical verses where they speak of similar or related states of mind. We have the book of Job, Job 7:13. Job too was afflicted with suffering and problems and bad incidents that occurred to him, and he too was mightily perturbed and disturbed by these events. Job 7:13 says, "If I say my bed will comfort me, my couch will ease my complaint, then you frighten me with dreams," he's complaining to God, "and terrify me by visions, so that my soul would choose suffocation, death rather than my pains." Saul was disturbed after being deprived of the kingdom. An evil spirit sent by God associated with visions, hallucinations, imaginations and dreams. It brought on depression, despair, suspicion, anger, mood reversals. Also we find Abimelech in the book of Judges. Abimelech and the men of Shechem, it says a bad spirit came between them, Judges 9:23, and caused them to fight with each other, quarrel with each other, to suspect each other, and to eventually war against each other, and to in recrimination and treachery. Yehuda points out that according to the Bible, only someone who's experienced the pleasantries of God, or the Spirit of God, can suffer so much when the Spirit departs, which is similar to the other commentaries that we have mentioned. Yehuda quotes, translates it was batata, that we have shown elsewhere meant terrorized. This translated as terrorized. It means beat after beat, continually, as the Radak says. He also says that it connotes fear and trembling. He was afraid, he was horrified by what was going on with himself. And so we have it. We have this incident. We have this phenomenon. We also see that the music of David helped Saul to some degree. Saul employed David to play music on the harp before him. Music can uplift the spirit. It can relieve tension and make a person happy. And this affects the spirit of a person. The physical effect of the music affects the spirituality of a person. He's in the psyche, as if to say he's in the mood. And music can help elevate the inner being. It can bring on the spirit of prophecy. We even find music being used to induce prophecy. In 2 Kings 3, it says the prophet Elisha, when he was asked to prophesy, he said in verse 15, "Bring me a minstrel, bring me someone who plays on the harp, who plays a musical instrument." And it came about when the minstrel prayed, the hand of the Lord came upon him, that is, on the prophet Elisha. So music has a spiritual and a material quality. And this helped. Not only music, but anything which brings on a sense of physical well-being is also positive. Can also have a positive effect. We find in this the story of Isaac and Esau. Isaac was the father of Esau. Isaac wanted to bless Esau, but Esau had been conducting himself in a way that caused Isaac and his wife Rebekah to be angry at him, to be disappointed in him. Find in Genesis 26:34, when Esau was 40 years old, he married Judith, the daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and Basemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite. And they brought grief to Isaac and Rebekah. And it says straight after that, in the next verse, Genesis 27:1, it came about when Isaac was old and his eyes were too dim to see, that he called his older son Esau and said to him, "My son," he said to him, "Here I am." Esau said, "Behold, now I am old, and I do not know the day of my death. Now then, please take your gear, your quiver, and your bow to go out to the field and hunt game for me, and prepare a savoury dish for me such as I love, and bring it to me that I may eat, so that my soul may bless you before I die." So what happened here? Esau needed to be blessed by Isaac. Isaac wanted to bless Esau. But Isaac was embittered to some degree. He was embittered toward Esau because Esau married women who were not proper for him. And therefore, to overcome this bitterness, this reluctance, as if to say, to bless Esau as he wanted to, he asked Esau to go out hunting venison, hunting game, food, deer or whatever, and to prepare it to make up a nice dish that he might eat it and be satisfied with the food, and from that well-being his spirit would be uplifted and he would be enabled, he hoped, to bless Esau. So here we see the spiritual dimension being affected and assisted by the physical one. And so too, when we combat mental illness or physical despair or depression or whatever, so that is also a way to do it. Physical being helps in such instances. You can do a physical activity, also a good meal can help. And we also should learn from David that David too had a similar situation, and he used it, he got over it by composing the Psalms and saying them, and the Psalms do help. The Psalms are of medicinal value in such cases. May the Lord God of your soul bless you. Thank you.